Okay, so my bag's looking a lot nicer. One thing I'd like to do though is maybe soften up the edges just a touch more. So I think I'll use sculpting to do that. Uh, Before I do, I'm going to demonstrate though really quickly. So sculpting will work in certain cases, in other cases it won't. And for example, if I have a cube right here, and if I go into sculpt mode and I start sculpting this, nothing's really happening. Now, that's because when we go into edit mode and look at this, there's all of 8 vertices. It's kind of hard to sculpt a thing when there's nothing really there to sculpt. Um, so, for example, if I subdivide and I add a bunch of geometry, and we'll just go with the default 10 or whatever. And now, if I go into sculpt mode on this cube and I start to do things to it, you can see that it's starting to be manipulable, something that I can manipulate. Okay, and that's because there's now actual geometry to affect. It's not real clay. You actually need points to be able to manipulate for a thing to be manipulable. Skews that. So looking at the bag, let's just take a quick peek. I'm going to go into edit mode. All right, we've got a fair amount of geometry, so I think this is something that can be sculpted. Uh, there's difficulties that can occur, so I want to be careful too. I'm not going to get too crazy on this. This isn't a sculpt type project, but I'm just thinking it might be a quick, easy way to be able to manipulate the edges and just soften them a bit more. So I think for this case, I'm just going to use the smooth tool. I'm going to keep the, now you've got these circles that you see when you hover over the surface, and that has to do with the strength and the radius. If I adjust the radius, you see how much larger this circle has gotten. Okay, there's also this strength tool, right? I've got it at 100% now, and it's just this very large circle. When I change the strength way back down, you see that there's a very small circle inside of the large circle. And that's the area that's mainly being affected. So I'm going with a fairly tight radius and a fairly small strength. I don't want to do anything crazy because, again, let's just take a quick peek at the geometry. Um, when you start moving, sculpting, basically you're shoving vertices around, and that can be problematic. So anyway, let's just do this, and I'm just going to, oh, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the X and the Y on, because whatever change I make here and here, I also want them to happen on the other side of the mesh. I want a degree of uniformity. So I think what I'm going to do now is just grab right here in the corner, and I'm just going to slide over a bit, and just, you can barely even see anything happening. That's okay. I'm not trying to do anything extravagant. For example, though, let's just go ahead and make the strength larger. And you can see that it's very clear what's happening there. I'm going to Control Z on that. And I'm going to take that strength back down quite a bit. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Just kind of work around each corner just a bit. And we'll see what that gets us. Doesn't seem like a big difference. Uh, but let's go into edit mode and just kind of see what we have. And I am also looking to make sure that the geometry doesn't get too messed up. So let me just go back into sculpt mode. Maybe I'll take the strength up just a bit. And see what that does for us. There, we can see that that is affecting things. And we're also going to do a little bit right there. And we'll do the same thing right here. Just kind of grabbing along the corner. We can see that some things are happening. Vertices are definitely being pushed around. And now if I take a look at this in edit mode, okay, we can see, okay. Now here's the other thing to be aware of is that as I shoved things around, it looks like some changes occurred here. My suspicion is that that's two vertices, but it's kind of hard to see them. So let me just grab this on Z. Well, maybe not. Let me see. Let's control Z it again. Okay, so now let's grab this edge. And I'm just going to grab this on Z and shift it down a little bit. Yes, there we go. So we can see that I've inadvertently shoved some vertices around. I'm going to grab this edge too and just grab it on Z and shove it down a bit. And that's something to be aware of in sculpt mode. It's not necessarily a big deal, but the more time you spend shoving vertices around, the more of this can happen, and sometimes that can be problematic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just grab each of these vertices, and I'm just going to grab them on Z and move them down a little bit and see what that gets us. And I'm going to just take a peek in object mode and kind of see what that looks like. All right, so the main thing is sculpt mode is kind of a quick, easy way to be able to shift things around, but you do need to be aware of how that can affect the mesh overall. And sometimes it depends on what you're doing with this mesh. If you're 3D printing it, it's one thing. If you're using it in a video or a photo, that's another thing. If it's being used in a video game, in some type of a 3D modeling program like in Unity or in Unreal, that's another scenario too, potentially. So just things to be aware of.